Everything you've been told about reality is incomplete. You weren't born into a neutral world, you were born into a filtered version of it, a version designed to blind you to your own power. You were taught to believe that you are your body, your mind, and your five senses, that what you can't measure isn't real. But here's the truth. The real source of your power lies in what you can't see, an energetic field that surrounds and flows through you, quietly shaping your life behind the scenes. This isn't spiritual fluff. This isn't about incense, crystals, or rituals. It's about accessing the most ancient, intelligent, and forgotten layer of reality, the Akashic Field, a living field of consciousness that records every thought, feeling, and event across time, a field you are already connected to. Once you understand how to mentally interface with it, you'll realize that reality isn't something that happens to you. It's something you can influence with clarity, focus, and intent. You've been walking through an energetic world your entire life. You just weren't taught how to see it. That feeling you get when someone walks into a room and changes the atmosphere without saying a word, that's energy. That tension in your chest when someone lies, even if you don't have proof, that's energy. And that strange intuitive hit you get when you're about to make a decision, the one you usually ignore, that's the field trying to speak to you. Not metaphorically, literally. We live in a world governed by frequencies, vibrations, and fields of information that move faster than the speed of thought. Every cell in your body is in constant communication with the world around it, not through language, but through resonance. But here's the trick. The system you were born into trained you to filter this out. It taught you to only trust what can be seen, measured, categorized. In doing so, it severed your awareness from the most potent tool you were born with, your ability to tune into and interact with the unseen energy that surrounds everything. From an early age, you were conditioned to identify with the physical, your body, your name, your grades, your job. But you are not the labels. You are a signal. And that signal is constantly broadcasting into the energy field, whether you're aware of it or not. Your thoughts aren't just private, they're frequencies. Your emotions aren't just chemical, they're vibrations. Everything you think and feel becomes part of the field, shaping your experience of reality in ways you've never been taught to notice. But the truth is, you've already been using this energy unconsciously. What we're here to do is make it conscious. When you walk into a room and feel drained for no reason, that's not just social anxiety, it's energetic incoherence. When you meet someone and instantly trust them, even though you've barely exchanged words, that's not random chemistry, it's frequency resonance. You are a walking transmitter, constantly interacting with the emotional, mental, and spiritual frequencies of others. But instead of being taught how to manage this, you've been taught to numb it, to dismiss it, to call it imagination. But the truth is, this field is as real as gravity. The HeartMath Institute, for example, has shown that the human heart emits an electromagnetic field measurable several feet outside the body, and that emotions directly alter the coherence of that field. Studies on brainwave entrainment and frequency therapy show that energy is not just an abstract idea, it is the language of the body and the cosmos. And yet, this isn't taught in schools. It's not in your curriculum. Why? Because if people understood how to control their inner field, they'd stop being easy to manipulate. They'd become powerful in ways that no system of control could predict. Some truths go too deep for YouTube's algorithms. That's why we created Insights Academy, our free newsletter where we share what can't be said here. Sign up through the link below and get a free copy of The Kybalion for a limited time only. You weren't meant to live disconnected from your energetic intelligence, you were meant to master it. And once you understand that every thought, every emotional reaction, every belief is like tuning a dial on a cosmic radio, you begin to see the truth. You are not stuck. You are simply out of alignment. The world around you isn't happening randomly, it's responding to your signal. The question is, what frequency are you unconsciously broadcasting every day? That internal chaos you feel, it isn't your fault. You were taught to live in mental noise, but noise is distortion, and distortion keeps you out of sync with the field. It keeps you reactive, distracted, and energetically fragmented. This is why learning to mentally control your energy field isn't some esoteric side quest. It's foundational. It's the beginning of reclaiming your autonomy, your clarity, and your ability to shape your life on your terms. Because when your internal field becomes coherent, the external begins to reflect it. Synchronicities increase, intuition sharpens, resistance fades. The field begins to work with you, not against you. And that's when everything starts to shift. The idea of the Akashic Field has been ridiculed, misrepresented, or buried for centuries, but not because it's unreal. Quite the opposite. It's because it's too real, too powerful, and too accessible. If the average person understood what it truly is and how to work with it, the entire structure of control that society is built on would begin to crack. So it was branded as spiritual mythology or New Age nonsense. Easy to dismiss, easy to mock. But the truth is, the Akashic Field isn't a fairy tale. It's an intelligent, energetic matrix of information that exists beyond time and space. Every action, every emotion, every thought you've ever had, every moment that has occurred in the universe, it's all recorded, and it's all accessible. The name Akasha comes from ancient Sanskrit, referring to the subtle etheric element, the most refined of the 5 elements in Vedic cosmology. But this same concept existed across civilizations. In ancient Egypt, it was seen as the memory of the gods. In the mystery schools of Greece, it was the great unseen. The Hermetic tradition called it the all-pervading mind. Even in modern times, visionaries like Nikola Tesla, Carl Jung, and Edgar Cayce all referenced a field of consciousness where knowledge could be accessed beyond the 5 senses. It was never a secret, just consistently ignored by systems that benefit from your amnesia. Today, what mystics and sages once whispered about is now being observed through the lens of theoretical physics. Quantum field theory, the holographic universe model, zero-point energy, these all point to a substrate of reality that is non-local, interconnected, and far more intelligent than we've been led to believe. In fact, several physicists have proposed that the vacuum of space is not empty at all, but brimming with potential and encoded data. Sound familiar? That's the Akashic Field in scientific clothing. The information is there, but science just hasn't caught up to what mystics have always known. You don't need machines to access it. You need consciousness. The Akashic Field operates like a living memory. It doesn't judge. It doesn't interfere. It simply holds everything, and that includes you. Your energetic imprint is woven into it, which means you're not just a participant in the field, you're also a contributor. Your thoughts, your emotional states, your decisions, all of it echoes into the field and becomes part of the whole. But here's where it gets interesting. Because it's a living system, you can interface with it, not by magic, but by alignment. When your consciousness reaches a certain vibrational frequency, one of clarity, intention, and coherence, you begin to receive information. You begin to remember, not in the traditional sense, but on a deeper level. Downloads, insights, emotional recognitions that seem to come from nowhere. That's not intuition pulling from thin air. That's the field whispering back to you. You've already experienced this, even if you didn't realize it. Those moments when you knew something you couldn't possibly know. The flash of insight that solved a problem instantly. The vivid dream that felt more real than waking life. The feeling that someone was about to call you, right before the phone rang. We brush these off as coincidence or imagination because we were trained to ignore the invisible. But they are signals, evidence that your consciousness is already linked to something greater. The Akashic Field is not reserved for monks or mystics. It doesn't care about your religion or your belief system. It doesn't require you to be perfect, enlightened, or pure. It only requires presence, focus, will. When you begin to shift your awareness from reacting to life to observing it, when you become still enough to feel the signal beneath the noise, the field starts to respond. And in those moments, reality begins to reveal itself not as a sequence of disconnected events, but as a living web of intelligence. You are not separate from it. You are woven into it. And when you remember how to tune in, you stop feeling lost. Because for the first time, you're not just in the universe, you're in communication with it. From the moment you were born, you were immersed in a world that taught you to value the visible over the invisible, the measurable over the intuitive, and the logical over the felt. The system didn't just ignore the Akashic Field. It systematically trained you to believe it didn't exist, not out of scientific prudence, but out of control. Because if you trust only what you can see, weigh, and prove, you become blind to the subtle signals that give you power. You become disconnected from your own knowing. And a disconnected mind is easy to manage, easy to sell to, easy to scare. Look at how children operate before the conditioning kicks in. They imagine freely, sense deeply, trust their intuition without shame. They talk about dreams like their memories. They pick up energy from people instinctively. But over time, they're corrected, taught to be realistic, told what's real and what's nonsense, nudged toward external authority for validation. By the time they're old enough to articulate what they feel, they've already learned to suppress the very instincts that connected them to the field in the first place. School doesn't teach you how to listen to your inner field. It teaches you how to memorize what someone else has already decided is important. It doesn't reward introspection or subtle awareness. It rewards output, obedience, and repetition. Your imagination, once a doorway to higher realms, is downgraded to daydreaming. Your intuition is dismissed as irrational. Your silence is filled with noise. And somewhere in that process, you forget what it feels like to truly know something beyond words. Media finishes the job. The shows you watch, the music you hear, the characters you're told to admire, they all reinforce one message: trust the system, follow the rules, ignore your own signal. The heroes on screen don't meditate or reflect. They react. They don't receive guidance from the unseen. They're given orders. Even the spiritual characters are portrayed as outcasts, lunatics, or comic relief, subtle cues that tell your subconscious to avoid that path. Every time you felt a quiet knowing but reached for a screen instead, the conditioning deepened. You were taught to drown out the field with stimulation, to fear stillness, to run from your own energetic depth. But it wasn't just media or school. It was language itself. Phrases like, "That's just your imagination," or "You're being too sensitive," didn't just dismiss your feelings. They reprogrammed your perception. You learned that your body's reactions to subtle energy were wrong, that the sensations in your chest, the pressure in your head, the chills down your spine were nothing more than emotions or quirks. But those were the whispers of the field, and you were trained to mute them. Even science, at least the version of science that gets mass approval, has played its part. While quantum physicists whisper about non-locality, entanglement, and the observer effect, the mainstream narrative clings to outdated materialism. It's not that the evidence isn't there, it's that acknowledging it would mean tearing down the entire structure of how we've been taught to view reality. It would mean admitting that consciousness comes first, not matter. That mind shapes reality, not the other way around. And that's dangerous to a system built on hierarchy, dependency, and external control. What's worse is that this suppression has made you mistrust your own experience. When you felt glimpses of the field, those moments of déjà vu, prophetic dreams, spontaneous knowing, you've likely dismissed them. You've learned to question yourself more than the system. That is the ultimate control, when the gatekeeper isn't outside you but inside your own mind. But here's what they can't erase. The field never stopped speaking to you. It's been there in every moment of silence you ignored, every intuitive hit you brushed off, every strange synchronicity that made your skin crawl in recognition. It's never abandoned you. You've just been taught to stop listening. Reconnecting isn't about learning something new. It's about unlearning what's false. It's about remembering what your body already knows, what your mind once trusted, what your spirit has never forgotten. Because once you start tuning back in, even subtly, the illusion starts to crack. You begin to notice patterns where there used to be randomness, You start feeling presence where there used to be emptiness. And slowly, steadily, you begin to remember that you were never disconnected. You were only distracted. You've been told your thoughts are private, personal, and harmless, that they live and die in the mind, bouncing around in your head until they're forgotten. But that's a lie. Thought is not passive. It's not just an echo of your consciousness. It's a force. Every thought you have emits a frequency, and that frequency doesn't stop at your skull. It ripples out into the field, shaping and interacting with the energetic matrix that underpins your reality. Whether you're aware of it or not, your thoughts are constantly creating, attracting, repelling, and imprinting. This is why the system trains you to think in circles. It's not accidental that your mind is flooded with fear, doubt, shame, and distraction. Because if thought is energy, and it is, then a distracted thinker is an energetically fragmented being, and fragmentation is a weakness. A fragmented mind can't influence the field in any deliberate way. It leaks energy. It gets pulled into loops. It becomes easy to manipulate, easy to exhaust, easy to control. They don't need to control you with chains. All they need is to keep your mind busy, reactive, and misaligned. Watch the news long enough, and you'll start thinking in fear. Scroll through social media long enough, and you'll start thinking in comparison. Absorb the dominant narratives long enough, and your thoughts won't even be yours anymore. They'll be echoes of someone else's intention, vibrating through your field like static. And the worst part? You'll believe those thoughts are your own. That's how deep the programming goes. But when you start to see thought as a tool, as a literal mechanism that influences the field, you begin to take it seriously. You stop casually indulging in worry, in resentment, in rumination. Not because you're trying to be positive or high vibe, but because you understand that every thought is a broadcast. Every emotional charge is a signal. The combination of the two, thought fused with feeling, is what sends data into the field, and the field listens. This is why intentionality is everything. When you think with purpose, clarity, and emotional alignment, the field begins to respond. You start seeing feedback, synchronicities, openings, ideas falling into place, not because you manifested something, but because you became energetically coherent. You tuned your frequency to match a certain outcome, and the field adjusted accordingly. This isn't magic, it's resonance. You're not manipulating reality, you're harmonizing with it. But this requires discipline, and that's a word most people shy away from, because we've been taught to think of discipline as restriction. But in this context, discipline is freedom. Mental discipline means choosing your signal. It means interrupting the habitual thought loops that keep you energetically scattered. It means noticing when your mind is being hijacked by fear narratives and consciously choosing a different frequency. Not because it's more positive, but because it's more aligned with what you actually want to create. The field doesn't care what you want. It cares what you are. That means your results aren't based on your wishes. They're based on your energetic patterns. You don't attract what you say you want. You attract what you consistently broadcast, consciously or not. And until you bring your thinking under conscious control, your energy will remain chaotic, conflicted, and misaligned. This is why surface-level affirmations don't work for most people. You can say, "I am abundant," 100 times a day, but if the emotional current underneath is fear, scarcity, and self-doubt, the field registers the frequency, not the words. It's like trying to send a message through a broken radio. The static speaks louder than the signal. The field reads coherence, not performance. Once you understand this, you realize the most rebellious thing you can do is think deliberately. To observe your thoughts, not with shame, but with sovereignty. To clean up the frequencies you've been unconsciously looping for years. To choose new patterns not because they're trendy, but because they resonate with the future you're stepping into. The moment your mind becomes intentional, your energy becomes magnetic. You stop being a passenger in your life and start becoming a signal tower, broadcasting with clarity, receiving with accuracy, creating with purpose. This is mental control over energy. Not control in the dominating sense, but in the mastering sense. You're not forcing the field to obey you. You're learning how to speak its language. And the first word in that language is thought. We live in an age where science is worshipped like religion, yet the most powerful discoveries, those that bridge consciousness and reality, are buried, ridiculed, or quietly filed away. The Akashic Field is not fantasy. It's a reality hinted at by mystics and quietly studied by governments, researchers, and black-budget institutions. The real science of consciousness, of how thought interacts with energy, of how the human mind can affect physical matter, has been fragmented, scattered across disciplines, and kept from the public under the guise of not enough evidence. But the truth is, the evidence was never the issue. The threat to control was. In the 1980s, the CIA conducted classified experiments under the Gateway Project. Their goal? To explore the limits of human consciousness, out-of-body states, and the impact of focused awareness on time, space, and even the fabric of reality. These weren't spiritualists in a basement with incense. These were analysts and scientists who discovered that consciousness doesn't just sit in the brain, it extends beyond it, able to interact with information fields well outside the bounds of physical perception. That includes the Akashic Field. Other institutions, like the HeartMath Institute, revealed how the human heart, far from just a pump, generates a powerful electromagnetic field, measurable several feet from the body and more coherent than the brain. This field shifts in direct correlation with emotional states and, more importantly, has been shown to influence the energy fields of others. Think about that. Your inner emotional frequency is not just personal, it's communicative. It's a signal. Studies in quantum physics consistently point toward non-locality, the idea that particles can be connected across vast distances without any physical link. Entanglement shows us that what happens to one particle affects another instantaneously, regardless of space. Now scale that up. If particles respond this way, what about people? What about thoughts? What about the memories, emotions, and energetic imprints we leave in a space after we've left? This is the scientific backdrop of the Akashic Field, what ancient mystics called the Book of Life, now observed through probability waves, informational fields, and resonant energy structures. But mainstream science avoids this terrain because it's messy, unquantifiable by traditional methods, and most of all, because it threatens the illusion that reality is fixed, mechanical, and objective. If your focused thought can influence reality, then the systems built on authority collapse. If your inner coherence can attract specific outcomes, then the industries profiting off your confusion start to break down. If you can access infinite intelligence through stillness and intention, you stop needing experts to interpret life for you. That's why the science was hidden. Not because it didn't exist, but because it gives power back to the individual. Even the placebo effect, a phenomenon acknowledged across all of medicine, shows us the undeniable power of belief. When a person heals because they believe they've taken medicine, even when the substance is inert, what is that if not mind over matter? What is that if not consciousness shaping the field? This isn't pseudo-science, it's inconvenient science. And it points to one truth. Your consciousness is not a side effect of your biology. It's the architect of your reality. Ancient civilizations understood this. The Hermeticists spoke of the All, a universal mind through which all things exist. The Egyptians encoded energy work into their temples and rituals. In Vedic traditions, prana, the vital life force, flows through subtle channels and is directed through thought and breath. These systems weren't myths. They were blueprints for navigating energy consciously. But as modern institutions took root, anything that couldn't be monetized or measured was tossed aside. Spiritual technology was replaced with mechanical tools. Inner mastery was traded for external dependence. And the Akashic Field, once central to human understanding, was relegated to mysticism and metaphor. But now the cracks are showing. The more you dig, the more you find overlaps between mysticism and quantum physics, between meditation and neurological coherence, between intention and measurable shifts in matter. The more you look, the clearer it becomes. You're not a victim of your environment. You're a participant in a responsive, living field. And when you learn how to communicate with it, everything changes. This is the science they don't want you to study, not because it isn't real, but because it can't be contained. It makes you sovereign. It makes you a creator. It renders systems of control obsolete. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you understand that consciousness is causative, that the Akashic Field responds to mental focus, emotional frequency, and energetic clarity, you stop chasing the external world and start shaping it from within. Accessing the Akashic Field doesn't require robes, rituals, or a guru on a mountain. It doesn't demand belief in anything. It asks for something far more difficult in the modern world. The Akashic Field isn't hidden. It's just quiet. It doesn't scream over the noise of constant thought, dopamine hits, and overstimulation. It speaks in resonance, in subtle shifts, in awareness. And it's always broadcasting. You've just forgotten how to tune in. You've been conditioned to think that higher states are rare, reserved for mystics or spiritual elites. But altered states aren't rare. You enter them every day, right before sleep, in deep focus, in moments of awe, when you're lost in creativity or immersed in music. These states lower your brainwave frequency, taking you from the sharp, external focused beta state down into alpha, theta, and even delta. It's in these slower waves that the conscious mind softens, the ego quiets, and the subconscious becomes receptive. This is where the field becomes accessible, not through effort, but through receptivity. You don't push your way in. You align your way in. Start with breath, not because breath is magic, but because it's the most direct tool you have to shift your internal frequency. Deep, intentional breathing calms the nervous system, lowers brainwave activity, and anchors your awareness into the present moment, the only place the Akashic Field exists. You can't access it while obsessing about the past or projecting into the future. You meet it in the still gap between thoughts, where awareness simply is. Then comes focus. Not effort, not strain, but clear, coherent intention. The field doesn't respond to desperation or mental noise. It responds to vibration. So your mental state has to match the frequency of what you're seeking. That means you need emotional alignment. You don't access deeper truths from a place of fear. You access them from curiosity, openness, and a willingness to hear what you didn't expect. If you're demanding an answer, you'll block it. But if you're holding space for insight, you'll receive it, not always in words, but in imagery, feelings, sudden clarity. That flash of knowing that bypasses logic and settles straight into your body like a truth you forgot you knew. That's the field responding. Symbolism also plays a role. The subconscious speaks in metaphor, not sentences. Using symbols, whether through visualization, sacred geometry, or sound, helps bridge the conscious and unconscious mind. These tools act as access keys, not because they hold power on their own, but because they communicate with your inner world in a language the field understands. Think of them as tuning forks that help bring your mental state into resonance with the greater field. You may feel nothing at first. That's normal. You've spent years, decades, living in the frequency of distraction. Recalibration takes time. But the more you practice dropping into stillness, the more you'll begin to notice subtle shifts, ideas that arrive before the question, feelings that don't come from your personal story, intuitive nudges that lead to strangely perfect outcomes. These aren't coincidences, they're confirmations. The field always responds, but the clearer your inner signal, the cleaner the feedback. Access can also happen spontaneously. You might find yourself in a heightened state during nature walks, in the shower, during sex, or moments of deep emotional honesty. That's not random. That's alignment. The Akashic Field becomes most accessible when your defenses drop and your awareness becomes fluid. You're not escaping the body. You're becoming fully present in it. You're not reaching out to something out there. You're expanding into a layer of self that has always been here, just quieted by noise. What you'll realize quickly is that the more you practice, the less effort it takes. The Akashic Field doesn't require belief. It requires coherence. You don't need to be spiritual. You need to be clear. Clear in mind, open in heart, and grounded in body. That's the access code. And once you start entering this state deliberately, you'll wonder how you ever lived without it. You'll feel less lost, less reactive, more in tune with subtle direction, like life isn't just happening to you anymore, but happening with you. You don't need permission. You don't need rituals. You need presence. And that presence, when combined with intention and emotional clarity, is the bridge between you and the infinite. Not just as a seeker of knowledge, but as a participant in the field itself. You were never disconnected. You were just never taught how to listen. Once you begin accessing the Akashic Field deliberately, life starts to feel different, not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in the quiet reordering of everything. You don't wake up one day and suddenly levitate. Instead, you notice that your sense of time softens, that your thoughts begin to sync with events before they happen, that things you were once confused about suddenly feel obvious, not because they've changed, but because your position in relation to them has shifted. You're no longer standing outside of life, trying to figure it out. You're inside the current. You're receiving, interpreting, and aligning all at once. This is what happens when the field opens. It doesn't hand you superpowers, it restores your natural state. You begin to trust what you feel, without needing constant justification. That strange pull to turn left instead of right, that moment where your body says no even when your logic says yes, that flash of a person's truth beneath the words they're saying, these are not anomalies. They're what happens when the noise drops and the signal gets clear. The field starts reflecting more clearly and you begin to see what was always there, waiting for you to notice. Time behaves differently too, not because you've mastered time travel, but because the field operates non-linearly. You might get a sense of something days before it happens. You might remember something differently, not in a distorted way, but in a way that gives it new meaning, as if you're revisiting it from a higher vantage point. This isn't imagination. It's a dimensional perspective. When your awareness taps into the Akashic current, it stops seeing life as a single straight line and begins to view it more like a web, each point connected, each thread vibrating with memory, meaning, and possibility. You may find emotions surfacing out of nowhere, not because something is wrong, but because you're clearing the static in your field. Old griefs, buried anger, unprocessed fears, they rise because the frequency you're now holding doesn't allow them to stay hidden. The Akashic Field doesn't just provide insight, it reveals what's misaligned. It acts as a mirror, not to punish you, but to recalibrate you. And when you face these waves, not with judgment but with presence, you transmute them, you free up energetic bandwidth, and suddenly the inner fog clears. You'll also notice that people start responding to you differently. Without announcing anything, your presence begins to shift rooms. Conversations deepen. Shallow connections fall away. Opportunities seem to arrive uninvited. This isn't magic, it's coherence. When your field becomes steady, it naturally repels what's unstable and draws in what aligns. You don't have to chase. You resonate. And resonance is magnetic. Your dreams may shift. Your body might crave different things, foods, environments, even people. You'll begin to sense when your energy is being drained or distorted. You'll walk into a room and feel the weight of unspoken tension. You'll watch a film and feel where it's trying to manipulate your emotional field. And slowly, you stop taking things at face value. You stop reacting from programming. You start choosing from alignment. This is the mark of someone who is no longer just observing reality but participating in its construction. And then there's intuition. Not the soft whisper of doubt that's easy to ignore, but a clarity so direct it's impossible to dismiss. You'll think of someone and they'll call. You'll speak something and it will manifest within days. You'll feel things in your body before your mind catches up. These moments don't just inspire awe, they ground you in the truth that you are always connected. That guidance was never outside of you. You were simply tuned to the wrong frequency. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the noise took over. The Akashic Field isn't a destination. It's a mirror. It reflects you, magnifies you, and brings into form whatever you consistently carry. And when you start walking through life with that awareness, not with fear, but with trust, you stop trying to force your path. You start listening. And the field, in turn, starts to speak more clearly, not in thunderclaps or visions, but in synchronicities, nudges, and effortless flow. This is what it means to reclaim your energetic sovereignty, to stop outsourcing your power to systems, opinions, or outdated beliefs. To recognize that the field you used to think was mystical or unreachable is actually the foundation of your being. You don't access it through striving. You access it by becoming still enough to remember it was never separate from you at all. There's a reason you've never been taught about the Akashic Field, a reason why it's dismissed as fantasy or fringe, even though ancient civilizations and modern quantum research both point to the same undeniable truth that your consciousness has power, not just metaphorically, but energetically, tangibly, and in ways that threaten the very foundation of control. Because once you know that your mind can interact with reality, you're no longer manageable, you're no longer predictable, and you're no longer dependent on the systems designed to keep you compliant. Think about what happens when someone truly understands their ability to influence energy. They stop reacting to fear-based narratives. They stop chasing validation. They stop living in scarcity. That kind of person doesn't buy into consumerism the same way. They don't follow orders blindly. They become self-regulating, intuitive, and increasingly sovereign. And that is precisely what today's world is not built for. Because the modern system isn't here to awaken you. It's here to distract you, to keep your energy leaking out in every direction except inward. Because the moment you go inward, the game changes. The media doesn't educate, it agitates. It keeps your nervous system in a state of mild panic, so your mind never quiets. Because if your mind quieted, you might start noticing the subtle signals underneath. You might start receiving insights that weren't fed to you. You might stop consuming what they're selling. Every ad, every headline, every algorithm is engineered to keep your frequency low and erratic. Just enough stimulation to keep you addicted. Just enough fear to keep you frozen. That is not an accident. That is a system. The educational system doesn't train you to think. It trains you to memorize, to conform, to seek permission. It teaches you how to absorb approved narratives and regurgitate them on command. There is no curriculum on energetic literacy, no lesson on internal resonance or how to use your consciousness as a tool. And why would there be? What school wants a student who questions the entire structure of the institution? What employer wants a worker who understands they're an energetic creator, not just a cog in a machine? Religion, in its institutional form, has played its role too. It teaches that divinity is external, that salvation comes from obedience, and that questioning is dangerous. Meanwhile, the very teachings many religions are built upon, the mysticism, the metaphysical wisdom, the inner knowing, are stripped out or labeled heresy. The Akashic Field isn't absent from spiritual texts. It's just been coded in metaphors, buried under dogma, and made inaccessible by design. Because a spiritually sovereign human is impossible to control. Even science, as public-facing as it is, has been carefully curated. The studies that suggest consciousness affects physical reality, quietly buried. The research that shows intention can influence biological systems, underfunded or dismissed. The findings that support non-local intelligence, memory and water, or energetic healing, laughed out of mainstream journals, not because the science is flawed, but because the implications are too big. If mind can move matter, if thought can reshape biology, if intention can shift probability, then who really holds the power? That's the threat. That's why you've been told to dismiss your inner knowing, to mock the subtle, to laugh at the idea of energy fields or higher awareness. Not because those things aren't real, but because they are. And the more people who awaken to that truth, the harder it becomes to run a world built on compliance, addiction, and fear. The system needs you confused. It needs you plugged into the matrix of noise. Because the moment you start unplugging, even a little, you begin to remember that you were never just a body, never just a mind. You were, and are, an energetic being with access to a field of infinite memory, insight, and possibility. Once you step into that awareness, control slips, not just over you, but over anyone who connects with the truth you're embodying. Because awareness spreads, presence is contagious, and sovereignty, that ripples out faster than fear ever could. This is why they built the world the way it is, not to protect you, but to contain you. And this is why your awakening isn't just personal, it's revolutionary. Because when enough people remember how to tune into the field, how to move through life with clarity, coherence, and intention, the structures built on disconnection can no longer hold. The final step isn't about learning more. It's about remembering what's always been there. This isn't about becoming something new. It's about stripping away the noise, the programming, the dependency, until all that's left is clarity, stillness, power. Reclaiming your energetic sovereignty isn't a path you walk once. It's a state you return to, again and again, until it becomes the ground you stand on. Because once you realize that your energy is the foundation of your experience, everything changes. You stop outsourcing your alignment to circumstances. You stop waiting for permission to feel whole. You stop looking for proof that it's working. You understand that the external world is just an echo of the internal one. And when your field is coherent, reality becomes responsive. That doesn't mean everything becomes easy. It means everything becomes intentional. Life doesn't stop challenging you, but it stops shaking you. You don't rise above the chaos. You simply stop being pulled into it. This is what happens when you remember that the Akashic Field isn't somewhere far off. It's not a library in the sky, not a spiritual plane reserved for the few. It's right here, right now, coded into every atom of your being, woven into the spaces between your thoughts, whispering through your intuition. It's the signal beneath the static, the intelligence within the silence. And you access it not by force, but by dropping the need to force anything at all. Sovereignty means you're no longer at the mercy of your reactions. You observe your thoughts instead of obeying them. You choose your emotional state instead of inheriting it from whatever's trending, whatever's urgent, whatever's loud. You recognize when energy isn't yours and let it move through without attaching to it. You don't need to win arguments, prove your value, or play roles just to feel seen. You become your own reference point, your own signal. When you live from this place, you stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "What is true right now?" You stop chasing outcomes and start aligning with frequency. You stop trying to predict the future, and instead meet the present with such clarity that the future bends in your direction. This is not a theory. This is the forgotten architecture of who you are, the part of you that doesn't need to be saved, fixed, or upgraded, only remembered. And the more you live in this state, the more undeniable it becomes. Synchronicities become normal. Peace becomes your baseline. Even amidst difficulty, you sense a deeper intelligence at work. That's not luck. That's the field reflecting your alignment. You begin to trust life again. Not because it always goes your way, but because you're no longer misaligned with your own source. You no longer view intuition as a backup plan. It becomes the plan. You don't use energy tools as a crutch. You become the tool. And the more you remember this, the harder it is for the world to manipulate you. Because now you see through it. The noise, the fear, the constant tug to be somewhere else, buy something else, be someone else, it all starts to fall away. Not because you're better than it, but because you've moved beyond needing it. You've anchored yourself in something deeper, and in that anchoring, you give others permission to do the same. That's how this spreads, quietly, radically, through example, through frequency, through presence. If you're serious about mastering the Akashic realm, our Insights Academy newsletter dives deeper into what we can't say publicly. Sign up using the link below and receive your free digital copy of the Kabbalion while it's still available. This isn't just about accessing the field. It's about becoming it, walking as it, living as someone who knows the power isn't out there. It's been humming in your chest the entire time. And the more you return to it, the more you'll see that you were never disconnected. You were just distracted. Until now. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."